We would love to hear where you were at and what you were about and doing when you first heard about the Peace Camp.
Okay, God. I lived in Chicago. I was a student at Northwestern, and Jane Eyre and Gale, Windwalker, Landwalker, something walker,
Windwalker.
right? Lived in, was it in Albany? No, not in Albany, in that small town.
Almond,
New York. And they were friends of Victoria Barber, with whom I lived at the time. And they told Victoria and I about the idea of Peace Camp. And I headed out this summer after my second year of college to help prepare Peace Camp. I was there from pre-opening, first summer, in the middle of going to school in opera. And I was being a young lesbian separatist in Chicago at the time, exploring the world. I was, 19? And that's where I was. And so I showed up at Peace Camp before July 4th, 1983. Wow. I guess I was there the month of June. So that's where I was when I first came into that idea.
And I was living in Bloomington, Indiana, and I was very, very good friends with a woman named Jane Schliessman, who had been to Peace Camp at the startup, who was an attorney, who just had nothing but wonderful things to say about it. So in '84, after the Michigan Women's Music Festival, Jane even lent me her car to drive to Peace Camp, and I went, and I don't even remember how long I stayed. I think my employment situation was open-ended at that point. And I think I was there for a month.
No, because I had to be back at school.
Oh, was it less than a month?
It's less than a month.
Okay. I was there for less than a month because she had to get back to school. And somehow I had some responsibility in that.
I was going to say, wow.
Well, she drove me. I just know because I drove with her.
Yeah.
Back to go to college.
Yeah.
So, but did you know Jeanne-Michele when you came to Peace Camp?
No. But I knew her fairly well by the time we left. And I continue for almost 25 years now, which is rather frightening to
know her? Or that
no, just that
It's
25
really
years has passed. This is a big marker to just sit and do this interview and think, wow, it feels like yesterday.
So talk a little bit about each of you, about being at the camp. What was that like? What were your impressions?
Well, for me, I was learning about being a community activist in Chicago at the time. So when I got to Peace Camp, it was like the perfect experience of Girl Scout camp, where everyone, well, first summer, especially for opening, there were lots of different kinds of women, so it wasn't quite just lesbian camp yet. That happened later. But I was in a place where I was into thinking about living by consensus, living in community, making that work, and Peace Camp really taught me so much about that. And as I said, I was 19 when I first got there, so I was quite wide-eyed. I'd come from hippie, politically active parents, so I had grown up in lots of alternative ways, and it just seemed like paradise till we had to fight about what to do about flags. And we spent our first 3-day consensus meeting with 3,000 of your closest friends. Well, that was first summer, and we were just opening, and we had lots of women and also their families, because we had the support camp at the state park there with the men and the children. And some women wanted to carry American flags, and they wanted us to approve that. And so we worked at it. I think it started with really 1,000 women at the first meeting, and we cored down and really did spend, I think, almost 3 days, 24 hours a day, discussing, and the final decision was any woman who wanted to make their own flag could carry it in the parade, but we wouldn't carry any pre-made American flags. But I was into it, I stayed. I loved that we were trying to work it out, that we were talking and talking and talking and processing and processing. And there were so many different kinds of people then, really. Because I think there were even, well, we had the Catholic, the very radical Catholic women there. We had Buddhist nuns. We had everything from really different perspectives, and all then the lesbian separatists all working together, and I loved it. No, we spent a lot of time in nonviolence training that first month, so that we could then train the people that were arriving.
So when you showed up, did you have a sense of, we're going for a weekend, we're going for 2
I
weeks?
showed up to go for the whole summer.
So you knew when you arrived you were...
We weren't together.
Right, no.
I knew when
Victoria
I
there?
went, no.
So you
I
came
went by myself. Actually, no, I think Victoria came with me the first arrival.
Okay.
And we got there before Peace Camp opened, I think that month of June, to get things ready. So we were really making space, making campgrounds, putting in water lines, building all the, I don't know if you remember, we built all those little, I don't even know what you call them, structures to house things, because people were selling things and sharing things, and there was art. I mean, it was a big celebration. So we were really preparing the land to be inundated with women and children for opening weekend. And I was there to build and then stay for the whole summer.
So you knew coming, you were staying. And
I knew
Victoria
coming.
went back home at some point.
Victoria went home and came back. But by then I was lovers with somebody else. Because that was also the experience at Peace Camp.
What's what?
Lots of women being together and just exploring, being lovers with various people, and for me, exploring my own sexuality at that time, and sensuality. Lesbian summer camp. And I never stayed a winter, so really it was summer camp for me. I spent 3 summers.
And do you remember arriving, if it was something that was just going to happen that first year? Or what was your sense? Was it...
I think that no one really knew. It was like when did you come?
Until 85?
Yeah, so, and when you were there always. We were both there always.
Right, well, I got there the day after opening.
Oh, okay. So I was there the month before.
Yeah.
When I arrived, it was tiny, and it was hard work. Because we had the barn, we had the house. We needed to make space. And I think we had over 3,000 women camping there on opening weekend. Can't remember the exact numbers. But it was huge. So the arrival and that month was really about making infrastructure and kind of figuring out where we were all going. So in the beginning, it wasn't a real party atmosphere. I mean, we're all thrilled and we felt like we were working towards something, but we worked our asses off.
And how did you know what to do? And how did you all have skills to do what you did?
I didn't have any skills. I had brains and willingness. So I was told what to do in a lot of situations. There were some carpenter women there and lots of different women with different skills who, okay, nobody was leading us. That didn't happen. But, you know, there were people that had different abilities that certainly guided us at different times. For instance, we laid water pipe. That was first summer. We laid water pipe from the house all the way back through the big field to the far back campgrounds. And I had never done anything like that except on my family farm, but we dug all the trenches and put in piping. And I was one of the femmes that needed to be showed how to use tools, quite frankly. But I did.
Right.
So yeah, it was, I don't remember who was specifically guiding us. We planted a lot of stuff. We planted gardens. We did a lot of the work about arranging food donations that first month. And then, of course, that work continued. But that, we were working things out with the state park, permits. We had big fights in Romulus about permits to have our parade, nuts and bolts.
And what was your state of mind around the threat of nuclear war or weapons, or your understanding
I think it was,
politically at that time?
Well, I was raised just late enough that I wasn't ducking and covering. But I was raised by parents that were anti-nuclear and socialist towards communist. I was raised in a different circumstance than many people in the U.S. And I felt a very real fear of the U.S. striking out with nuclear weapons into the world. I think the presence of cruise and Pershing missiles, which was our original rallying cry at the base as a transshipment point, really was frightening. And yeah, I went there to do work. We went there to really fight that, to try to stop it, and we felt empowered that we could stop it. And as soon as we had so many women, and we were so non-threatening, but they were so scared of us. I mean, that was when they started putting up the fence. That first month we were there, they fenced the whole base, you know, from a place that hadn't been fenced because, oh my God, 1,000 women were getting together to have zucchini pie next to the planes. It felt like we could change the world, and like we were changing the world in that way, and that we were really fighting a very fearful, male-dominated, male-driven, warmonger society.
I got there second summer, and I think that some of the drive, I think it had turned more into Girl Scout Peace Camp. I mean, that was my impression, and I came from a very different background than Jeanne-Michele, and was very politically naive, extremely politically naive, shall we say. I probably had only really been exposed to lesbian culture via music festivals and stuff for 3 or 4 years, so it was all kind of like, it was still overwhelming to me. And we're very different people. I am very much somebody who sees a job and just goes and does it, and also I have probably now, with 25 years past, much more patience with consensus than I would have had then. I didn't have a lot of patience.
Nor does Jean now.
No, I have more patience now than I do. I have a child, so that creates a consensual, thing. But it was just all intriguing to me. I mean, half-naked women running around on land, and some people doing jobs that obviously needed to be done, and other people making clear choices that there were jobs sitting right under their noses and making choices not to do them was a very, those were choices that I never even considered in being in the world. And I really wanted to do peace work. I mean, that was really, wanted to be involved in demonstrations, and there wasn't so much of that organized second summer, I don't think, as there was first summer. It was much more, it just felt like a lot of people running amok on the land sometimes. And not that's not a criticism. I mean, it just, the firewalk people came. We did firewalks that year. I remember doing firewalks. My friend Jane that I was talking about, Jane very much wanted to do a personal act of civil disobedience. And Jane had many, many health problems. And I was very healthy, so we had a plan, and Jane and I one night climbed the fence. We had this all scoped out, and Jane and I spent the entire night walking around the base, thinking that we would get caught. I mean, we took food.
Lemonade. You took lemonade.
We had some
lemonade party.
And we had cookies. We had lemonade and cookies.
That's right, I remember.
And we spent the whole night walking around, really talking pretty heavy. Jane was one of my good, deep philosophical friends. And it was getting, it was like 4 o'clock in the morning, and we had been walking everywhere and hadn't been detected, and we kind of felt like part of our thing was to be noticed, to do something. So we made a decision to walk out on the road. So we walked on the road, and finally, we heard a car come, and we said, we're just going to stay. Well, car stopped. I don't remember how many people got out. But we were interrogated, and it really felt like an interrogation, not just simple questions. And the one thing that these guys kept coming back to was, where are the others? Where are the others? Because to me it was an amazing display of how powerful we were, that we had no idea, that they were hysterical because they couldn't conceive that just two people could be out walking around and we were clearly not harming anything. I mean, we didn't have anything with us. And within 5 minutes, the helicopters came out.
And all of us waiting outside for support were just like, oh, shit.
You know, and it was that they never let up on that. Where are the others? Where are the others? Where are the others? You know, they handcuffed us. We got sit in the back of a truck. We drove to the base, and you know, my memory is really pretty sketchy about that. Except again, being interrogated and let out. And at some point, you guys called to find out if we'd been picked up yet.
Yeah, we were fairly
Because-
hysterical on the outside as usual. Waiting.
And I don't even. We never went. You know, we finally were let out in the morning.
At the front gate.
And we never, I don't ever remember even being arraigned. We were warned.
You
we were
gave
given
false
a warning.
names.
No, we
You
gave
got-
false
you
names.
did get a
thank
letter
you.
for arraignment.
And we never went.
No, they got called to court.
Yeah,
we
we
got a
didn't
letter
go.
in Indiana years later.
Yeah, we didn't go.
Oh.
We just didn't go. And by then, Jane was dead. Jane didn't live much. You know, Jane died within a year after that. She got colon cancer and died pretty rapidly. So, you know, the whole thing was intriguing to me. It really exposed me to a whole different way of thinking and living that I hadn't really considered. I grew up in a very sort of straight Republican working class family, and you just didn't do things like that. You just didn't say no. And you know, it changed my life in a great many ways. You know, and the second time that I was arrested, was that the same summer?
No, yeah, after
it was the
Helen's trial.
After was when Helen went to trial in Rochester, and they threw her in jail for 30 days, and nobody had expected that. That was an unprecedented punishment, if you will. And what I recall about that was there was a rather spontaneous, you know, we knew they were going to bring Helen out. People gathered outside, and there was a rather spontaneous pulling off my jewelry and saying, "Here, honey, hold this. Hold this."
I took all the jewelry.
Because it just seemed abominable.
That was third summer.
Was it third summer?
Yeah,
it was
Was it?
third.
I don't even. I
85.
you know, I can't keep track of
We
it.
weren't honeys.
Yeah.
We weren't really honeys yet.
But Helen, you know, Helen came out in the paddy wagon. I just remember a spontaneous group of people. Sita being the only person
Jane, Sita,
that I remember
Fish? No.
lying down in front of the paddy wagon.
Remember
And-
Jane got into
And
driving?
Jane got in to drive the paddy wagon because there was no driver. The driver had gotten out. And what was the hilarious part was, I just remember all of us being put in the back of the paddy wagon with Helen, and Helen saying, "Well, I never expected to have company." And all of us going to jail and spending the night, you know, they put us all in separate cells, spending the night in jail. You know, and eating that horrid food, horrid food. And most of the women, I was on a corner, so I think actually there was an empty cell, but most of the women around me were all prostitutes. That was, you know, they were all African American. They were all poor. That was really clear. And then being arraigned the next morning, and I will never forget Sita coming out, and Sita
Do you remember
had
with the toilet
taken
paper?
toilet paper and twisted it and braided her hair. Her entire head was covered with toilet paper.
She was so beautiful, so striking.
She-
You know, the toilet paper head.
Oh my God! And you know, and being terrified. I mean, I came from a place where the law was the law, and you better be terrified. But also of just having tremendous disrespect for the entire amount of bullshit that was going on in that courtroom, and also again the amount of power that we had. You know, we hadn't really done anything except sit down on a sidewalk, and that there were just mass. You know, there was just.
But
this
remember, when
mass
you all
action.
sat there, we all got hit.
It-
I got
it- it
hit.
got-
It got
I
violent.
remember. Well, I got
It was-
dragged because I just
Right.
really
and
went
they were
limp.
pinning women up against that wall.
Somebody hit me with the billy club standing on the sidelines. I mean, it
You
was
know,
really
yeah.
violent.
It was
Frightening.
well, but just by virtue of sitting down, that we were that scary. I mean, I've never forgotten that sense of how powerful, you know, like how powerful that is. I also remember being in lockup before being handcuffed, and then not letting anybody make any phone calls. You know,
We were all at your house.
and
Hysterically
us,
trying to find
you know,
lawyers to
continuing
figure
to
out
have
what
the
to do.
conversation
Getting
of
money.
this is illegal. We need to have a phone call, and you know, it just didn't fucking matter. It was illegal. We didn't get a phone call, and all of us agreed at that point that we weren't going to go to court because we knew we were going to go to jail, and we all gave fake names, And actually, by the time there was a summons to court, I was actually on my way to New Mexico. So it didn't happen, but it left a powerful impression.
So that moment when you were outraged about what had happened to the court, at the court, and you gave away your jewelry, did you have any sense what you were going to do or what you hoped to achieve?
I just know that it seemed important to make a statement that them taking Helen off to jail for 30 days was ridiculous, and short of absolute violence, there wasn't any way to make that point in the moment, and it felt important to make a point in the moment because there were bystanders, there were people, there were crowds. I think there was a reporters. It just felt important to do that.
And you were willing to get arrested?
Yeah.
You knew that might be a possibility?
Yeah, that's why I gave him my jewelry. I mean, I really knew that there was the potential for physical harm.
And in our little group, it was a decision of who would do it, because I had Jane's jewelry, Sita's jewelry, Bobby's jewelry. When we had a group that said, "You stay out, we go in."
Yeah,
So you guys went that way.
it was just.
Wasn't the intention when you first went around to the back to get a chance to say
Well,
goodbye?
it may have been,
It was
but
to say goodbye,
but-
and that when they sat down.
Yeah.
we had a longer time than we anticipated.
Right.
Didn't Luna jump in the
In the
courtroom? Did she jump over
courtroom,
the
Luna, when
thing to try and
Helen,
get to Helen?
She did. She jumped over the
Luna,
ring
and then the guys got,
because they were lovers then.
right, and she was
That's why you
so
jump over
upset.
things if you're like-
Or
And I
unless you won
remember
the
that
tennis
when we
match.
went out to the front, and then we were strategizing about trying to watch the whole building so that we
Right.
would know
Where she
where
went
they
out.
were
Right,
going to bring her
right.
out.
Yeah.
But then the cop cars, those paddy wagons, started
So
coming up,
scary.
coming up. And
So
I remember trying to hear what the cops were talking about.
That's
like
right.
doing the
Yeah,
peacekeeper
exactly.
thing. And then at some point, turning around, and because there was one cop was giving me a hard time and the others were going up, just ignore her.
Yeah.
And I was just like leaning into their group, listening.
Yeah.
And then all of a sudden I realized that women had moved away, that people were going to the sides, and that, holy crap, if something happens
That's
here,
right.
I'm all alone. And then we went, all of us ended up on the back end of the courthouse. And it got, with Jane, I was negotiating with the chief
That's right.
about, just giving us some time to say goodbye to Helen. And Jane got into the vehicle, and all of a sudden it was craziness. There was no more negotiations, and suddenly women were up. They had grabbed women and were putting their arms
They
in
had
their
belly
necks.
clubs, yeah.
And
They were
it
wild.
got quite violent. And most of us had nonviolence training. And so then suddenly to be in the middle of this escalating brutality where they were ugly.
Not only-
and the language that they were using, and suddenly,
I was
Yeah.
much more in the thick of somehow remembering to somehow do what I wanted to do and not get hurt and stay safe. And I don't remember what that was.
Yeah.
I don't have a lot of. I just remember lots of bodies moving rapidly.
It's
right.
true, because we did a lot of training, but we didn't have a lot of those times. Because the first summer, most of the actions and the parades, nobody really knew what to do with us. But by second summer, because remember there was also that big parade in Seneca Falls, that's where those pictures are for, when we had all the anti-demonstrators,
Yeah.
and where the police were tough, and we sat down, we did a sit-in, and we got dragged off. In
The
second summer.
Waterloo.
Oh, Waterloo was in
54.
Waterloo.
That was
That
actually
was
the
second-
first summer. No, that was the first summer.
Were you part of that, Johnny?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I wasn't one of the arrested ones, but I was
You were part of
there.
the march and then the circle and the protesters.
Yeah,
and the
exactly.
parade.
Yeah.
And I was one of the people sitting down, but I only got dragged off. I didn't get arrested.
Yeah.
That was
That
Waterloo.
was actually
First
in
summer.
The first summer.
Yeah, that's right. That whole Waterloo thing. That was the
Right.
first time we had, as a group, big confrontations with the police.
What do you remember about that?
I remember we were all in a very celebratory mood, and we went up there. And again, we were faced with that fear from the cops, and then all the people that were opposed to us demonstrating. And to me, I remember it like big numbers, but it was scary. It was just something that I hadn't seen except, as a kid in civil rights things, but where I felt threatened. and where we were afraid, and where we had to take the ideas that we'd been all discussing and, you know, working on, and put into action a plan, and also remain nonviolent. Because when the police started dragging us away, it was suddenly a confrontation on a whole different level. I don't know how you remember that. And I remember fear. I mean, for me, it was very frightening. Because once again, we weren't doing anything. You know, we were marching as a celebration, something that was obviously acknowledged by a lot of people, and we were once again considered the enemy. Yeah, you know.
Nuke them till they glow.
Yeah, exactly.
Shoot them in the dark. Nuke them till they glow.
That's right. And we had little kids that had those kind of signs. I mean, it was wild how people reacted to us.
And there was actually a guy with a gun.
Yeah.
They're still there. They're still out there.
Had you been arrested?
I never got arrested. Opening day, I went on the base. I didn't get arrested. I just couldn't get arrested. The opening day, we had a big celebration where, remember, we webbed the front of the base? We made a big web, and a few of us sat inside the web right in that entrance to the base, assuming we would get arrested. And we didn't get arrested. But they didn't have any precedent at that point. They just dragged us off. And I was one of those people. Sita, myself, Pauline, I don't remember. I think Samoa, Robin, I want to say Julie was there, Jane, Gail. But a group of us went in as far as we could go.
And you were willing?
We thought we would be arrested. We were handcuffed, but then we were just dragged off. Or handcuffed with the little strips. Never metal handcuffs.
So that first summer, were there other civil disobedience actions?
Oh yeah, we did. I mean, that summer, all the people came from the peace movement. Women came who were really from various peace movements around. I said there were the radical Catholics. I don't remember.
There were
the
Greenham Common. All the Greenham
affinity
Common
groups.
women were there
Yeah.
too.
The Greenham Common
Greenham women came.
Yeah.
The Buddhist nuns were all there at the opening ceremony.
And many groups came, their whole affinity group came
to get arrested.
to get arrested
Yeah.
with a specific idea
Yeah.
of what they were going to do.
Exactly.
And
So those of us that
puppets
were
and-
the puppets were Bread and Puppet Theater came. Bread and
Right.
Circus. Bread and Circus
Bread and
Theater
Circus.
came. They were at opening
And then
ceremony.
the spinsters.
The spinsters were there, and Barbara Deming came. I mean, we had all the heroes, were there at the opening. And those of us that were there from pre mostly did support. Like they would come, and since we were the core group, and people like me that stayed really from the beginning for the whole summer, there weren't as many women who were living there like that. And of course, I was only a summer person, but our job was much more supporting the groups that came, helping to train people, going out to the stores and asking for donations.
And the whole food thing, the amount
food
of
thing.
time
Oh.
that it took.
And remember we got so many zucchinis, we did an action that we called Zook the Nuke, where we went down that road past the Amish farm to the back
Q-zone.
where you guys had entered, to the Q-zone, and threw zucchinis onto the base.
And do you remember
That was hilarious.
the next year? I'm trying to remember who was on that action. You and I think Sita was there. I don't remember. We went to see the plane. Remember the
That's
white
where Helen got
planes?
arrested. That was where Helen got originally arrested, because she went on the runway.
Are you talking about when we
Yeah,
were-
but she wasn't with us that night. That wasn't
That
that
wasn't.
No, that was a different
You, me,
time.
Rachel Perkoff. You, me, Rachel,
Julie was there.
Julie.
I don't remember.
It was a small group, pouring rain.
We had ponchos on, and
Yeah.
we just were going to witness.
Went down
and
railroad tracks.
the white
onto
plane to see if we could see him loading stuff. Of
So you
course,
got a word that a plane was somewhere?
Yeah, and there was a
There was a
plane,
plane.
and there was a
We
plane,
saw it.
but did we see anything? No, it was pouring rain. I mean, mostly I remember being mosquito
It was.
chewed up and soaking wet, but
It was a big
just
night in our love story for
going.
me.
Okay, that does not need to.
Yeah, that's what
Do
Yes, it
tell.
does. Yes, it does.
Yeah, we haven't gotten to you guys yet, but so you went out there and
Yeah, we went out. I just remember, it being a mission. We went really late at night.
I think we put mud on our faces. I mean,
we were, we were in
it
full
was our
camp Girl
mission
Scout
impossible.
mode.
It was mission impossible,
We were earning our badge that night.
mosquito rain, mud bags. And were you planning to go over or cut?
No, there was no
through?
plan to do that. I don't, and
I think we didn't even know what we were going to do. We wanted to
No.
see how close we could get. We knew there was a plane. I don't think we took bolt cutters.
no, we didn't.
We didn't.
But
we
I could
hiked a long
suspect,
way.
I could suspect just from my own self and where my head was at the time, that had we seen nukes, that there might have been something spontaneous
Yeah, we were
that
all
could have
ready
happened.
for that.
Could have happened, just because it just seems like a horrific thing. It still seems like a horrific thing.
And it wasn't easy to get to the landing strip place. We walked a long railroad track for a long, we were gone.
And then
Probably a
what'd you
few
do when
hours.
you got there? And
Watched, that was it. Until
you
we
came
got
home,
tired of
nothing
rain and
happened.
mosquitoes and
And
everything.
did you see people or just the plane?
No, we saw people. There were people around the plane, but I don't remember that. There was nothing obviously going on.
And what time of the night are you talking?
Late midnight. I don't know.
we
I
went
think
out
it was like
late
midnight or
midnight.
something that we went out. But it was a white plane for whatever historical relevance that has.
Yeah, at the time we didn't know. I mean, none of us knew what. At least that's my memory, that we didn't really know what they were doing. We knew it was supposed to be something, and we knew they were acting like something bad was happening. And we had this myth of the white planes that were taking the bombs, but it wasn't like we were unknowns to them. They were unknowns to us. So we had a lot of just trying to figure out what was going on. And it was such a big place, and so much of it was not visible, that we were making it up.
Did you ever, either of you, use bolt cutters on the things?
Definitely, we used bolt cutters when we let you guys in.
We used bolt cutters. I thought we brought something. No,
You went
We
over.
brought a carpet and threw it over the barbed wire. and
We
went
did
over
cut
When you walked in
that
there.
place. Is it Q Zone? That railroad that driveway past the Amish people's house, went back
That's
into a
right.
field, across the tree line, and then you were back in the field. We cut then, and I think we cut on opening day. I think we had bolt cutters opening day, but it was very ritualistic that time. The night, there were times when we went out and cut just to, in the first summer, just to cause problems. To just say, we can do this. I do remember that. And I think fish was part of that. The Greenham Common women kind of led that, the more bold stuff, I think. Do you remember? I think so.
I think that's true.
They had already done it, so they were less scared, and of course their situation was even so much less protected than ours.
Did either of you have philosophical sense of what nonviolence was? Did it include property damage or trespass, or what were your personal senses of nonviolence in your lives at that point?
I can speak for now, but I'm sure that core belief hasn't changed in me in all those years, is that, I think harming other people is violence, and I think if it's government property, that has a different line than other people's personal property, and depending on what the government is doing at the time, and I felt like it was really a horrible thing that was going on. I don't really think it was supported by the American people, and Reagan was an idiot.
Yeah, and I think I agree with you that the line was her hurting other people and being hurt. I mean, none of us wanted to be hurt either. But the feeling was that the Army Depot, as a part of, as Americans, belonged to all of us, and as with the idea that it was protecting the world, then belonged also to all people of the world, so that trespassing didn't really exist as a concept. And the use of bolt cutters to harm property, we considered part of our statement that this was also ours. And in a more native approach also, that the land couldn't belong to anyone. I think that was a lot of what was going on in the mental atmosphere. Although, again, there were so many women in first summer that there were so many varying viewpoints, and each, as you said, affinity group kind of ran their own philosophy and their own concepts, and part of our life by consensus was that we didn't get in each other's way except in those big decisions that represented Peace Camp, the big group demonstrations. Yeah.
So now tell us a little bit about you guys. So you show up in the summer of '84,
Mm-hmm.
and
Well, it was Peace Camp love, you know. I was living with Victoria,
Is that all this is?
but she was having an affair with someone else when I arrived to Peace Camp second summer, as I had had an affair this previous summer when we had been living together.
Must I sit through this?
yes,
Yes,
if you want
must.
to.
And we met, and
So wait, what do you mean you met? Do you remember when you first met Jeanne-Michele?
Yeah, I remember the moment. You know,
Wait,
my,
we get a close up on this.
you might be surprised at what I
it might not be good.
Back
Don't
out
say
again,
anything
okay.
mean.
I have my hand on the Zoom because I don't want to.
No, I remember the night that I got there, you were there. I remember you. I had driven a very long way. I'd driven from Michigan by myself into uncharted territory, basically, and that was probably the first time. You know, I lived out in the woods a lot by myself at that point, but my first time, like, moving into populated territory and dealing with a lot of people. It's not, was not my strong point, and I'm much better at it
You are much
now.
better.
But I remember getting there late and Woody feeding me and bringing me food. And there was there was some kind of small group meeting, and there weren't a lot of women at the meeting in the front room and of the house, and you being there, and I just remember her from that moment on. And this is hilarious, but I think it's worth saying that we both had this judgment in this estimate of one another as being like trust fund girls, which is hilarious because neither of us come from any money, but it was just some sort of judgment based on appearance or whatever that
We guessed wrong.
we guessed wrong.
Age, everything.
Yeah. So I remember from the first night I got there. And then I remember within the first couple of days, back in the first field, sitting around a fire in the daytime. And you have to remember, I was very new to the lesbian community. And people were going around and saying their names. And it got to her name, and she said what I heard was Jeanne-Michele. And I thought, well, that is just too fucking weird to have a boy's name and a girl's name. Why can't you just...
Yes, you do.
And just thinking, that's really... But, you know, clearly I had radar already for this person. And, you know, then we did that. The plane action was the first year. The Rochester getting arrested here, honey, here's my jewelry thing. By then we'd known each other.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And at the time I was living in Bloomington and she was living in Chicago. So it's depending on how fast you drive the car, you can get there anywhere from 4 hours to 5.5 hours. So we once we knew each other at Peace Camp, we went back and forth.
But what transpired at Peace Camp in '84? I mean, so you noticed her, and then at some point
Sex.
you approached her. So
Sex.
Lots of good sex.
Yeah, she got rid of the other ones. Victoria was crying all the time. How could you
At
do this
Peace
to me,
Camp?
Jean?
Oh, yeah.
How could you
At
do
Peace
this
Camp.
to me, Jean-Michele? I hate you.
I
Go
saw
away
her
to me.
boots at your tent. Those kind of things.
That's a totally great.
It was hilarious. It was hilarious. So we continued. When we left Peace Camp, she had to be in Chicago by a certain time, and I drove you somewhere and put you on a bus. I
Yeah.
don't
I
remember.
don't remember where.
Where?
Probably Bloomington. I probably got on a bus in Bloomington.
No, it wasn't. It was
Maybe
someplace
anyway.
else. Anyway, so we did that and continued our relationship, and here we are.
And so at the time, the whole end of '84, you're going back to school. I mean, did you guys have a commitment to anything, or was it just like,
We
it
had
was
a
gonna be fun?
we were going to be rock partners. That was our commitment. We made
There
up
you
a
go.
word, and we didn't know what we were doing.
No, I went
But-
back to Bloomington and got involved with somebody else, but I was involved with her too.
you know, it was that time
It was
of our
that time,
lives.
yeah. And I would go up to Chicago. I would rent a car because my truck wouldn't go fast enough. I would rent a car and go up to Chicago, and I had a private duty job at the time, so I kind of had a little bit more leeway in my hours. And I just remember driving back from Chicago with the window, driving at 4 a.m. falling asleep because I hadn't slept all night, driving with the window down, hanging my head out, radio on, trying to survive that, and then.
We took a little break,
Yeah,
and then we were meeting second summer at Peace Camp. Was our idea to meet there and see whether we wanted to see each other anymore.
And you took a break based on what?
Girls.
Other things were going on.
other things were going on.
Girls.
Yeah, busy lives. Still do. Different way.
Oh,
So you said we'll come back in '85.
we'll meet at Peace Camp and see what's happening.
Okay, so
In
let me just
85.
take a little break from your relationship and just
Yeah,
ask
go ahead.
if the first year there was these political actions and the second year was more Girl Scout camp.
Mm-hmm.
Why did you guys keep coming back? Why would you come
For
back
me,
the first year?
I went back every year because even though it was, it was wonderful to be there.
Mm-hmm.
We had you felt like you were doing something wonderful for the world. You were with wonderful friends. We made art, we made food, we made music, we worked to save the planet. We did so many things at once. We all lived together. We were working on creating community and creating this safe space that was a contrast to this negative nuclear facility, or not facility, but transshipment point. And part of the idea became, I think by second summer, was to have this space to have actions and have people have a base to do what they needed to do about the depot and about their views in general of peace, but also was to create a juxtaposition to the negative energy being created by that. So it was just wonderful to be free to say, I was in college. I worked 2 full-time jobs in my little break so I could be free in the summer to be there, to say, I can give this time in my life. It's a time where I can go be in that and create that and be with all these women and have family in a whole new way. So that's why I went back. It was quite addictive.
And when you say went back, how many years did you go back?
I was there for the first 3 summers.
82, 83, 84,
8:45, all summer. And then after that I was back, and not quite in the workforce. I was in the workforce some in graduate school, but I never again had the freedom to live without money and just take large chunks like that. And I think things really changed. It became a much smaller, little, almost commune, right, for people that live there.
And this idea of non-monogamy, was it something that you had practiced prior to Peace Camp?
No, I've been a serial monogamist.
And for you, was it something?
I was 19, so I
There's
hadn't practiced anything
She's
yet.
nearly jailbait.
I'd lived with a couple people and tried a lot of things, but I was just figuring myself out. For me, from the time I met Bobby, I had the sense that I was going to spend my life with her in a spiritual
Shut
way.
up.
I swear to God, there it is, to the goddess. There it is. I had that feeling, and I was quite focused and pushing over the time of non-monogamy also towards her, because that was my vision. And I tend to be someone who's quite focused on my visions of what my life's going to be and make them happen.
And it was okay with me.
She came along for the ride.
Yeah, no, I don't think it was.
So you
Here's
said,
Victoria. No, I have to. Here's Victoria's famous sort of story about our relationship. Was first summer. She was still kind of quivering back and forth with Victoria, trying to take care of Victoria, wanting to be with me, blah, blah, blah. And there was something going on. I think I was going out to breakfast, is what I think it was, because I used to go to the
Remember
place
that
down the
place?
road. And I would eat meat, and she would look at me like, oh God, I can't believe you're eating meat. And I could see that this thing was going on, and I looked at my watch and I said, I'm leaving in 5 minutes. You can be in the car or not. I'm leaving.
Well, I like.
She was in the car.
no more quivering.
No more quivering.
No, and
That's our little story.
yeah. That's it.
So you said we'll meet and come back to the peace camp in 1985 and see what happens.
No, I was coming from Chicago. I went earlier.
Yeah.
I mean, again, I was really I didn't have a job. I was in college, so I had the whole summers, spending the whole summer.
And
So I think I was there a month later.
Yeah, but I think I took a lot of the time off because I think I was still doing private duty.
And it wasn't simple between us at Peace Camp, but things were really had changed there a lot by third summer.
Yeah.
And those of us that we all really felt a commitment to doing peace work, but what that meant as things were changing at the base, we didn't know. So a small group of us decided to take then Amazon truck, the truck that we had at Peace Camp, and go do peace work. And we'd had a call from Big Mountain in Arizona where the Diné people and you weren't in that truck. The Diné people and the Hopi Indians were being attacked by the National Guard. And they put out a call that they wanted to have at their Sundance people from all four races, all four colors. And that came to Peace Camp. And a group of us got in Amazon, went to the Michigan Women's Music Festival, and then continued on in a journey across the country to do peace work, which was going to take place in Big Mountain. So we took Peace Camp to Big Mountain.
I was
don't know if
only
you
in the
have the
truck to
story.
Michigan. Then I went on my own little journey. It was not peace work.
I guess I think it was Peace Camp, but we were taking it out into the world, which is what I think a lot of us that were there were trying to do throughout those years. I mean, for me, every time I went home, that's where I was going. I did a lot of things in Chicago for Peace Camp and about Peace Camp. And a group of us went and we lived for a short time with the Diné people at Big Mountain, and we were kind of assigned to different families to help out. And we were part of the Sundance, which was very intense for all of us. And a couple of women with us had their periods, so they weren't allowed to go, which was very hard for all of us. I mean, we had a lot of issues that came up. But one of the major issues was that what was happening to the native tribes as white people were coming in to basically help save them was causing horrible discord among families there. We became kind of the servants of the most powerful families in the tribe, and it was really ugly among the people. We did get invited, a few Peace Camp women, to a sweat, which was a big stretch culturally for them to invite us and also for us to go. And a group of Peace Camp women went to a sweat with Native women. It was really intense because it ended up with one woman from, I don't think she was a Peace Camp woman. She was straight, I remember that. Freaking out in the sweat lodge. That was this big ceremonial sweat. Women didn't usually do them, and then certainly white women didn't usually do them. About being in the sweat and praying, and she lost it and she wanted out, and it became a huge dialogue between the Native women, who then started saying, you come here and you try to co-opt our culture, you take our men, and we got into this big dialogue there, which then led to those of us that were feeling like we were doing more harm than help, going to Flagstaff and working there in the office that was helping Big Mountain. So the group of Peace Camp women went and stayed at Flagstaff with some local women, and we worked in the office in Flagstaff. And then we decided, we got invited by ARF to go there. And we thought, okay, next we'll go to ARF, which was Women's Land here in Santa Fe, or north of Santa Fe. And it was Julie, myself, Ta, Helen, Robin. I think that was
Where
the
did you
group.
lose Robin at?
Robin and Julie left from here
Did they? Yeah.
before
and Fish
you
and
came.
Becky had already left and come back east.
Wait, Fish and Becky were there. No, I think we all
No,
came to
Fish and
Santa Fe.
Becky.
Fish and Becky came too. We all came to Santa Fe, and we went to ARF.
But they were gone by the time I got
Jane
there.
came to ARF.
'Cause I
Jane,
came to
Air, and
ARF.
Sita came and met us at ARF. So a bunch of then women came and we met here at ARF. And I think Becky and Fish left pretty quickly. It was not their scene. And we really had made our way across the country stealing. We did a lot of actions, shoplifting, and yeah. We figured out how to steal gas, and we were driving this truck that said Amazon Witches painted across it, which was quite intense in the Southwest, but we started painting on it in Spanish too. And we had an invisibility spell that we would put on the truck, so we didn't really get hassled in the truck.
Well, we got yelled
Eventually
at.
we did.
We got yelled at some, but it was somehow it worked. I mean,
So you didn't make the trip across, but
I didn't make a
showing
trip
up here.
across. I was in Seattle, and I flew and
Met us here.
met them there at ARF.
And then a group of us stayed at ARF, and then some of the women had it that it was too much for them. So that was Fish and Becky, Robin and Julie all left. Then Bobby, Helen, Todd, and I had Amazon,
We had the truck.
Amazon had to be delivered to San Francisco. We had no money, and we decided that in doing piecework we would do PIECE work, and we ended up spending the fall.
We got
As-
in the truck and
Go
we
ahead.
drove up past Espanola, and we decided that. Well, first of all, I need to say this before we did that. Is I got really sick. I got sick at ARF. I got Giardia at ARF, and I found myself on the side of the mountain one night coming out of our tent, shitting so much that I thought I'm going to die here and roll down into the valley, and this is how my life is going to end. And then it got better for a while. Then we got in the truck. We went up. We
We went to Ojo Caliente and dealt with some women native healers there to help.
And
all
we
of us.
asked around and found out that if we drove up around Espanola, we might be able to pick apples. I don't know how we decided that apples was the thing to do. It was the time of year, but I don't know where that idea came from.
Somehow we were going to help migrants.
So here were the two of us, 6'4", very short, red-haired Helen, and Ta with her blonde rasta.
And I remember in Michigan
we-
when Todd got arrested for shoplifting in a camping store.
we digress.
Oh God, no, that's okay. No. And and so we went from farmer to farmer trying to find some place to pick apples, and we ended up in a little town called Rinconada at a stand run by this old Russian woman and her husband, and she's still alive, or at least she was last fall, so she was extremely old then. She's beyond old now. Completely, she looked like a dried apple.
Exactly.
With these piercing blue eyes. And she didn't need help, but her son did, who was farther up the road, and his name was Gigi Sopin. So
Organic farmer.
Organic apple farmer, and he took one look at the four of us and said, okay. So we picked apples for,
Well, first that day they thought we would quit because
he
we
did
had
the
no
trial
money.
by
Yeah.
fire. He did the trial
They
by
put us
fire.
out to pick baby ornamental corn in like the fourth pick over, and we all went out. The four of us. Oh, we could do this. We got sliced. Our bodies were sliced from top to bottom from the corn stalks, and we made 50 cents an hour, all four of us together or something.
But it was
we
also,
did it for 2 days.
we weren't acclimatized, so when you first come here, your skin gets really dry, your nose is bleeding, you're dying at first because you don't know how to
We've been here
hydrate.
much longer than you. You were having that.
But it was, here we are, and baby corn is this big. And it hides on that stalk. And
Which had all been-
bleeding fingers. I mean, it was, but we survived. And we needed a place to live after that, so we took Amazon, and we went up to the Rio Grande Gorge State Park, which is up near Pilar. It's past Espanola. Well, I'll get there. So first of all, we go up and we find one of the shelters in the park, and what we figure out, because we don't have any money, is that if we get up early enough in the morning, we'll pass the ranger. Morning, and we would pass him in the morning. Hi, how are you doing? And it was cold because it was September into October, and it's higher up there, so it was also friggin' cold. But we would do things like we would cook our cereal at night in the fire pit that was in the camp thing. We would sleep. We quit even putting our tents up because we were so tired. We would sleep in our tents like envelopes. And we would sleep. We had skunks who would come in at night, and so we got to be very tidy, and who would clean up the scraps from where we were. And I will never forget waking up in the middle of the night hearing Todd going trying to scare the skunks off, because the skunks would just come and walk on top of us. But as long as you didn't startle them they would not odorize
sprayed us.
No, they never sprayed us. And then we would get up in the morning, and right off the highway into the Gorge State Park, there was a little cafe. It was called the Pilar Yacht Club. And it had a big, what do you call that? You know, the wheel like you steer a boat with. And the handles of it were painted as chilies. So we go in there, and we meet this guy who's running a cafe, who's 6'4", big, excuse my language, big motherfucker, because hair everywhere. His girl is very small and diminutive. His name is Duncan Stewart, and Duncan was an ex-Hells Angel, and he looked every bit the part, you know.
And he talked every bit.
Every bit the part. And his girlfriend Deborah, and Barney the cook, who was an ex-con who just showed up one day and never left.
It was great.
And it was a sitcom, and they would let us come and
they loved us.
Eat our food that we had made. We would buy coffee and eat our food out on their back veranda, and let us eat.
In our Amazon
Witch's truck. And they...
With our little wooden chopsticks we don't carve.
You know, and he'd say, "Oh, you're working for Sopine, huh? Good luck." And, you know, we'd eat breakfast, and then we'd pile in the truck, and we'd go down to Sopine's, and we would pick apples. And she would sing opera in the top of the apple trees. Here we were, people.
Ta and Helen with the accents and looking so absolutely different than anyone else. I mean, we were a trip.
And we, and Giggy was nice. He would give us vegetables out of his garden. He would give us some fruit.
We ever ate
the guy was really, really good to us. And then we would go up and we would cook. I don't know where we got. I don't remember where else we got food.
And there was that family that had a goat. It was like Peace Camp on the road. I mean, we just asked people and they helped us.
How long were you doing this?
We did
a couple months,
yeah.
2.5 months.
And at one point, farther down the road was
sit on the ball.
Was a cafe that was run by two dykes, and who were very kind of like New Mexico sort
they
of
wouldn't
avoidance dykes.
They would not have called themselves.
Who had a little coffee shop and an antique store. They had a junk store.
Everything under the sun.
Everything under the sun, it was called. And one of them's mother died or got very ill, and they needed to leave. So they left us.
And Ta and Helen.
Frying
hamburgers. We were all vegetarians.
In charge of the shop. And here would come, everybody would come down the road. The workers would come down the road. "Hey, man, you want your eggs over easy or not?" And we were flipping, doing the thing, and they let us stay in our house. And then I had another attack of Giardia, and I thought at one point...
So did Ta, but not as bad.
Yeah, at one point I literally thought I was dying. I slept outside the bathroom at night, and at one point I just remember showing her how dehydrated I was and saying, "You need to do something, because I think I'm going to die now." And I got better.
That's when we went to Ojo Caliente.
That's when we went to Ojo
Caliente.
And got fixed. That's a little aside. But still picking apples, and then we went back, and then I think
making
we went
$2.50 an hour, all four of us. To get enough money to go to California.
So you're trying to save money to get to California.
Yeah,
Amazon trip
to
California.
And one point we challenged ourselves, and we asked Gigi, how many apples does a good worker pick? And I can't remember what it was he told us, but the four of us that day, picking as fast and hard as we could, the four of us picked almost as well as one worker, which was a phenomenal realization. I mean, I already knew those people worked hard, but the amount of work
for the lack of money.
For the lack of money. So one day and I have to say this about Duncan and Deborah. They were like kinfolk to us, and Duncan and I were married in another life. He and I are both convinced that because we just somehow. Here I am, and there he is, and we really understood one another on some level. We showed up at the store, and Duncan said, he called us ladies. Ladies, I have a present for you. And he had gone up into an arroyo and Amazon had a wood frame and canvas wrapped around it.
That we had built to live in.
It was not, it was Dyke Girl Scout camp built. He had pulled out an old camper top out of an arroyo that had blown down in there, and it was kind of dinged, and it was too long for the short bed. But he and I spent a couple of days cutting it down and making it fit Amazon, so we had actually a solid camper shelter.
Because two of us were always riding in the back.
Yeah, because
before there were 6 of us in the back.
There was not room. And, we started hanging out with them more and more. They would feed us. I mean, they were just wonderful people who took care of us. And at some point then, there was no more apple picking, and we had enough money. And we headed for...
We went to Flagstaff.
We went to Flagstaff.
Hooked back up with the people that were at the office there.
And we went to the Grand Canyon.
Grand Canyon.
Because none of us had ever seen it. So we thought while we were on the way, we would go to the Grand
We
Canyon.
went to Venice Beach and stayed with my sister-in-law.
Yeah.
And then we ended up in San Francisco, and then we were all really sick of each other.
Yeah.
It's a long haul.
Except for the two of us. We weren't sick of each other. Eventually, we had a friend in Berkeley who gave us a car who was out of town. We stayed. Helen and Ta left. I don't remember what we did with the truck.
We dropped it. We had to bring it to someone. We were dropping it off in California. I don't
And-
remember who it was, but
We stayed for a little while because neither of us had ever been there, and just kind of looked around. And then we got a drive away to deliver to Indianapolis, which worked. That's when I put in the budget.
yeah, to New Orleans. And I went to New Orleans.
And she went to New Orleans. I went back to Bloomington, and we stayed long distance for another year. But by
But
then,
by that point, you had already committed to each other, or you still?
No, we hadn't really. We were still quite in our
but I was
state.
monogamous at that point.
But we were monogamous, but we hadn't committed to each other. We were leaving it in the air. I always knew that I would go to graduate school in Indiana because it's the top opera school in the world. So even when I met Bobby, I knew that eventually I was going to end up in her town, but I didn't want to end up there because of her. So I took a year, I went and taught voice in New Orleans, and then the following year I went to grad school.
Mm-hmm.
But we still didn't live together. We took a couple years,
Two more years.
before we lived together, and
But
then
you
another
didn't
year.
have other lovers at that point.
No.
Not once I was living in Bloomington.
And were you ever, either of you, back at the Peace Camp after that Amazon
Never.
trip?
No.
Never went to the
I
land.
never went back.
Which was strange. We did live in New York City eventually for 10 years, and it was always on my list, but life took over, and we were working to survive and trying to figure out where we were going and what we were doing, and that we were in touch with Peace Camp women.
And we've always
In New
got
York.
lesbian connections, so there's always there's been throughout the years a thread of information about Peace Camp, where I'd see a letter and I go, oh, I remember that, I remember that person. And,
I still have my T-shirt from first summer, the maroon one with the circle and the bombs and the plants.
So there were some women from that time that you stayed in touch with as the years went by?
Well, for different time periods, I was in touch with Twilight. What was her name? She was lovers with Twilight for a while.
Leanne.
Leanne.
Yeah,
I was
Leanne.
in touch with Leanne. She visited us
Yeah, she visited us in Bloomington,
Bloomington.
Yeah.
Came and
which was
stayed
a lot
with
of
us.
years ago now.
Sita, we've seen her.
And
throughout
Sita
the
just
years.
called. I just said, Sita called.
Last time we saw her was on Cape Cod. She
Within the-
came and saw us in Cape Cod. Jane Eyre
Yeah.
through Victoria, but not calling her out.
And Tara, Helen, you?
No, after
It was-
California, it was a real.
It was less than amicable would be.
After all that.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it was so intense.
And I
mean,
think cultural
we worked-
differences, whatever, we were really different people.
And we worked so hard and lived so on top. We just never had a break from each other. And we really were struggling for food and money when we just didn't have anything. Eventually, my mom wired us $200, which got us
While we were in
across the
California.
country.
Yeah.
But, every penny we made together. Every time one of us didn't eat, none of us ate, It was
Yeah.
very intense. Once a long time after that, we had some contact with Helen.
How about Julie or Robin?
After that, no.
Mm.
Because when we all separated, nobody knew where they were going. None of us knew where we were going to live. I think Robin ended up back at Peace Camp, right? But when we left each other in Arizona or New Mexico, none of us had an address. None of us had. Bobby was.
I had an
She
address.
did, but the rest of us were all completely. Here's my mother's phone number.
Right.
Call her and ask what state I end up living in.
Uh-huh.
None of us, we were all so free-spirited at that time.
In '85, did you go on the base?
I did never go on the base.
Never arrested in '85?
No, I never got arrested. I got handcuffed once and put in the opening day, but we weren't arrested.
But I think my recollection is by then too, that kind of stuff had really subsided, that there wasn't so much going on that way.
We did a lot of web weaving on different fences and
Yeah.
singing at different places, and
Women didn't get caught very often
Yeah.
in later years. It was,
but also they got more violent. It got more scary.
yeah.
It changed. It really shifted. I mean, first summer there was
Right.
that kind of patience with us.
Right.
Nobody that got arrested first summer got prosecuted, for instance.
Right.
But
right.
remember, at the end of second summer, it was getting quite. We all felt like it was getting quite creepy in second summer. Like there were starting to be things happening that were much more threatening. We all felt like they were. Remember, we had that
the
worry with the
microwave
microwaves.
stuff.
Yeah, that all started second summer.
Helen getting put in jail for that length of time was
Yeah.
Rude.
Well,
Yeah,
it
I
was
mean, it
in
was so-
85 we began to be aware of.
The microwave
The
we started in
microwaving was,
Yeah.
in '84. I think we started thinking about it then.
yeah.
And then we started getting vandalized at the
Oh, well, there was
farmhouse.
yeah, there was there
The
was some pretty
Romuloids got
serious,
but-
some pretty serious stuff happened here and there. But one of the things was that, we dealt with it all.
Mhm.
We dealt with it in our wonderful ways, as scary as some of it was.
And we all had each other, even though the groups of other were changing. There was that sense that we were really together
What
in the
do you
beginning.
remember about music in the summer of '85?
You mean our band?
the band. We sang at Michigan. I remember.
We
I
spread,
have pictures
was
of
that-
Robin and Julie singing.
right, we
Like,
spread the rumor that we were going to take over main stage.
Oh God, you remember?
Do you remember that?
We crashed the gate at Michigan that summer. Oh God.
We'd cut the armbands
Yeah.
off and sang as
Loud and
right,
brassy as we
right,
could.
but we
Yeah.
were singing to the lines, to folks waiting in lines for lunch and dinner and all in different places.
Well, at that time, we were the radicals of that whole lesbian world. No, eventually, it was the S&M people, but it was the peace camp tykes that summer that they were afraid of. We were so wild.
Yeah.
And there was we sang on that stage.
Stage,
remember?
that's what-
We
on
did
It was
do
that
that
pickup, that
mic,
what do you call it?
open
Open mic place.
thing. Yeah,
That was so fun.
it was. It
It was so
was.
fun. That was probably one of the most fun Michigans I ever went to,
Yeah,
because we were just
there
out
were
there.
a lot of us.
There were a lot of us.
But song music in general at the Peace Camp, what was
You know what?
important
I
about that?
somewhere have a file of Peace Camp songs. I hope I didn't throw it away. I don't think I could have.
She didn't throw it away. She doesn't throw away anything.
Really?
I throw it away. But I didn't throw it. It was our playground. It was our
Our
place for us to
playground.
project all of our hopes and fears on the big boogeyman over the fence. I mean, there was, it was all that stuff. It's like I said to you earlier, that there was something about it that it's been a very long time, but when you really connect with people or connect with the situation, it never goes away, and that's why it's even though I can't remember dates and places, but that feeling is very, very fresh, and it never. And I also think it's the idea that people connected through something hopeful and something positive, and not something negative. That you are changed in some way, even if it only changes 2 neurons as opposed to half your brain. That it changes you in some way that affects you for the rest of your life in ways that you're not even going to notice. But perhaps you became a civil rights lawyer instead of a corporate lawyer, or you're still a lawyer. But that there are things that happen that it continues to affect you. It's documented that enough. You can experience neurochemically can change your brain, and neurochemical changes make neuronal changes at some point if the pattern is laid down over and over and over again. And I think that's possible.
Is it something that comes up in the course of the story of the history of your relationship?
That we met at Peace Camp. Oh yeah, that is the story. I mean, because aside from how we were raised and lots of other things, I think we both have a philosophical view of the world and how we think the world should be that hasn't changed. And I think that that's a fundamental thing to couples surviving. it's really, there can be a lot of other differences, but if you don't fundamentally believe that, there's hope or that the world is a good place or that you can.
I wonder if it was in the files that got ruined in Katrina from the bottom.
Could be.
I kept a folder of all our songs.
I was just talking about how I think that it changes neurons. I mean, that kind of connection changes. And some of it.
We are the web.
Yeah, and that people stay connected. I mean, it's really interesting for me to see you guys after all these years, because I don't, I have memories, but I don't have really specific memories. But I see your faces, and I know you. Like, there's a part of you that I know.
Yeah. The connection.
And that's.
It was there, and we were so intensely together.
And you meet people. I mean, you probably all have this experience, but I meet people. We've lived a number of different places now. We travel, and there are people that I meet, and I will say to her, they're keepers. That there'll be people that I could leave for 25 years and not see them, but then reconnecting, there will be a relationship. It won't be uncomfortable. It won't be all those things, because you made on some sort of. I don't.
Cellular.
Yeah, I don't think it's just spiritual. I think there's a cellular connection. Somehow that goes on, and that just doesn't. Time and distance don't matter in that kind of connection at all.
There it is.
And now you guys are putting it all together.
I'm sure, and you hear the same thing every week, don't you? No?
No, I mean the same sort of feeling, but
people leave really angry that haven't dealt with it.
some. But we'd really love to get some stories of people that really hated it, but they don't seem as willing to talk about it. Had really hard. We've had a couple of women that don't want to talk about it. It's just, it wasn't a good feeling for them.
We really wanted to document all of it.
Yeah, but we'd like to do that.
That's the
There was
reality
no
of it.
structure. I mean, now having been a parent for 10 years and watching childhood development and understanding different kind of ways of education, and that there are people in the world who, through no fault of their own, people come out neurologically very different from one another, and that some people don't do so well at creating their own structure. They don't even, they have a hard time creating that internal structure even, and that Peace Camp didn't have any structure at all. I mean, there was, that was the beauty of it for some of us, and for some people I can really understand that they couldn't find their way.
And I remember being there and having times when I thought, I'm here, but I'm not really part of that group, or those people don't like me, or moments like that, like everywhere in life.
Oh, yeah.
That were really hard and lonely, because we were all on top of each other.
Right.
And there was no other place to go.
Yeah, some of those
Music was a good
deep feelings.
And
everything came up. I mean, everything was there.
people are more or less damaged. I mean, there are some, really, really damaged women there. Really, really damaged. From, their life circumstances or their trauma.
Yeah.
And, I think that place was, some people found really a shelter in it, and other people it just re-stimulated all that trauma all over again, and it wasn't a safe place for them.
Yeah.